Good morning, James.
Tell me how you felt when you heard that response. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you must have been pretty close to pinching yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've just articulated in the narrative there really well exactly what I was feeling last night. I was angry after he said that, but I was also, I couldn't quite believe it. This was our Prime Minister, and a female MP had just described how death threats and abuse were happening, not just to me. This wasn't all about Paula Sherriff. I was speaking on behalf of a large number of MPs, and indeed cross-party MPs, and his response was to say, humbug, the leader of our country. That is how serious he takes the daily threats that are coming to MPs. And we heard last night from Jo Swinson, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. She received a threat to her child yesterday. This is where we are as a country, and for our Prime Minister to act in that way, it's beneath contempt, James.
The alternative would have been for him to pledge to stop using words like betrayal or sabotage, surrender in the context of the surrender bill. I haven't personally heard him, I don't think I've heard him use the word traitor, but that's a sort of hair-splitting exercise. The alternative would have been for him to pledge to stop using this language, and it occurred to me, as I sort of absorbed the impact of what happened to you last night, that if he stopped using that language, he'd have very, very, very little left.
True, absolutely. And let's be clear, the language he is using is entirely deliberate. There is no accident. This is all part of his strategy. I expected him, perhaps foolishly, perhaps naively last night, to adopt a more conciliatory approach, perhaps a more nuanced attitude, where he would talk about how the fact that it was clear that the country had to come back together, and as MPs it was important that we all treated each other with respect. And I acknowledge that this isn't just a Conservative thing, it's something that all MPs need to reflect and introspect on our behaviour and our language. This isn't just about Boris Johnson, but for him, like I say, our Prime Minister to respond in such a way just demonstrates once more that he is absolutely unfit to hold the great office of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
And of course, Jo's murderer did refer to her as a collaborator and a traitor in court. Did you know, I couldn't work this one out watching it, did you know when you stood up that you were going to invoke her memory?
No. I actually hadn't intended to speak in yesterday's debate. I went in, obviously I was interested to hear what the Prime Minister had to say in response to the outcome at the Supreme Court, and we were sitting there. I was amongst obviously other Labour MPs, and it was clear as the statement went on that the language that the Prime Minister was using, he referred to the surrender bill I think 15 times, talked about capitulation, betrayal, and his general demeanour and his use of language was really inflammatory. And as that was happening, I was looking on social media, and you could see that people were getting really wound up, and they were repeating that language, and they were taking it one step further, and it was clearly whipping up a storm. And I just felt I felt like I had to do it, James. I felt a duty and a responsibility to get up there and say that, and I hadn't. Even when I stood up, I'd approached Mr. Speaker and said, I want to do a point of order about the Prime Minister's language. He said, well, you can't do it during the statement. I said, right, in that case, can I shoehorn it into a question? He says, yes, that would be in order. So when he called me to speak, I hadn't intended on going on, being quite so emotional or speaking for such a long time. But it came from the heart. It really did. People are scared, James. I'm speaking to MPs from all parties, and indeed this morning a number, and I'm referring to more than 10 Conservative MPs have come up to me, and they have said they are mortified at the Prime Minister's behaviour yesterday.
This is where echoes of Donald Trump...
Including a Cabinet Minister.
Really?
Yes.
Gosh. Well, will they do that publicly then, becomes the urgent question, doesn't it?
I don't know.
I know you don't. I'm just pointing out the parallels that we've been examining all morning with America. The other question we've been asking all morning, and I'd be interested in your answer to this. You don't have to answer because I'm ambushing you with it.
Sure.
Is it deliberate? I mean, not necessarily...
Oh, without any shadow of a doubt.
Go on.
Oh, absolutely. Unequivocally, it's deliberate. And I will say on your radio show this morning that he is inciting hatred to MPs.
And that is why the memory of Jo Cox is invoked.
Absolutely.
To remind all of us that sometimes it's not just words.
People accusing me of using Jo's memory couldn't be further from the truth, James. But I, as you're aware, I represent the constituency next door to where Jo was. So we felt it acutely. Still do, every single day. And, I would never use Jo. Ever. Indeed, when Jo died, I didn't do any media interviews for weeks because I was absolutely beside myself. But we have to accept that words have consequences. And that was the point I was trying to make last night.
Well,
if we're not careful, we've seen there was almost an attack on Rosie Cooper. If we're not careful, something else will happen.